Okay, so today's question was, how do I best encourage and guide and help my 19-year-old daughter who struggles with low moods, low energy, and suicidal thoughts, exacerbated by the extreme restrictions that we're currently living through? It's such a delicate balance of push-pull, and I'm beginning to lose confidence in myself. Thank you, Richard. Well, the first thing I should say is, obviously I'm a clinician, so this, what I'm about to say is for information purposes only. And if you or anybody you know is suicidal, you should seek face-to-face help from a qualified specialist as soon as possible. When we're talking parents to children, I think before I get into the time we're living through right now, because it will be pertinent, your great power, all of our great power as parents or adults around children, and 19 is still young, is not so much in what you say. Kids don't really listen that much to what you say, but they watch and they copy what you do. And they have no control over that. It's unconscious. So some of you might know I worked in schools around the UK. I think I did some stupid number of schools in about 5 years. I can't remember. I figured it out once. It was like 400 schools or something that I went to around the UK. And I'd go in for a day and we'd talk psychology and state management and mnemonics for exams and stuff like that. And I learned on the job because the training I got for it wasn't very good. So I actually learned what I'd known from doing nightclub security, which was what I was doing before I did that job. Just a weird set of circumstances led me to it. A friend of mine who was high up in that, the potential for people to do that in the education system, he was very, very powerful. I was a doorman and I knew him because we used to do chanting together, believe it or not. Because I was a doorman and I had my own problems, and he was a bit spiritual, and he was like, oh, you should try doing some chanting with me sometime. So I go around to his house and bang bells and we do like the Gayatri mantra and stuff. I found it super relaxing. I really enjoyed it. But he also was working in schools. And one day he said to me, would you like to work with snotty, horrible 16-year-olds who don't want to study for their exams and have behavioral problems? And I said, absolutely fucking not. That sounds like a nightmare. I'd want nothing to do with that. And then 18 months later, I was a keynote speaker at the National Education Conference in Birmingham that was being headlined that year by Tony Bazan. Tony Bazan, if you don't know, he's the guy who created mind maps. It was weird how quickly I got into that. And I did hate it at first, but I found my footing. I found that like the stuff that I knew from teaching martial arts and from doing door work, I could bring to the classroom. Presence, charisma, sense of humor, social intelligence. These are things that adolescents respect at a primal level, at an unconscious level. Now, what am I saying to you? That every parent should try and have the charisma of like a stand-up comedian, or somebody who's stood on the door of a city centre in Liverpool? Well, you can't. It's not reasonable. But the insight I can offer you is that they'll do what you do more than they'll do what you say. It got to the point for me with classroom management. And remember, I only had a day. So I'd go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and I had to convert them, get them on side, get them doing what I wanted them to do through negotiation and giving them plenty of what they wanted inside of what was effectively from like 9 till half, it's like 5.5 hours. So you have to be fast and you have to be high energy. And I just I realized where they were coming from, and I just plugged straight into where they were coming from. So as parents, as teachers, as coaches, as guides, we can't afford to be naive. We can't come at it like, I'm not telling you how to raise your kid. Like you've asked me a question, I'm going to answer as sincerely as I can. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because what's the point? Like, you've already heard sugar-coated information and it doesn't help you, it does nothing. If you're not leading, they're not listening. If you're not doing it, they're not going to do it. So you can't say, don't waste all your time on social media and be arguing with your mates on Facebook and your auntie on Facebook about whether, the pandemic is real or vaccines are dangerous or not. Because I know you're doing it. I know you're all out there doing it. I see you all the time. My generation took over Facebook. It's incredible. Like Gen X's, Facebook is just full of people from the age of 40 to 70 arguing about politics. I remember when it was about cat pictures and people just posting pictures of themselves drunk at parties. It's all changed. So you go first. You lead. You want her to be smart, optimistic, disciplined, to be able to take the challenge of the times we're living through. You go first. You need to be smart. You need to show her and lead her into optimism. You need to show her and lead her into state management. You don't want her falling back on drugs, alcohol, cigarettes to cope. Well, you don't use coping mechanisms to cope. You don't fall back on TV, fast food, alcohol, or whatever you're doing to cope. They do what we do. They do what we do. Kids are the great test. They're the great challenge. You can't bullshit them. You cannot bullshit them. I don't have kids, but I was a kid, like most of us. Not all of us were. And I did have a family. I came from parents, and I've been to school, and I've had bad teachers and good teachers. I've had bad coaches and good coaches. We all have. We all know what it was like being 19, and then we hit a certain age and we pretend we don't. Just remember, what were you focused on when you were 19? How empty was your head? How focused were you on things that you thought were cool? Don't dismiss that. It's not dismissible. Teenagers want to be cool. What's cool? Are you cool? Are you cool? So if your teenage kids, your adolescents are 100% focused on cool, and you want them to listen to you, but you're not cool at all, how are you going to make them listen to you? You have to make them through force, which they'll resist and they'll resent. See what I'm saying? You've got to be smart. You've got to be smart. This is chess, not checkers. You have to lead. Now, you don't be cool like a 19-year-old, because that's not cool, right? It's not an easy thing to unpack. You have to be you in your way. If you want her to be happy in herself, you have to be happy in yourself. If you want her to be courageous and resilient as we go through whatever nonsense we're going through, you have to be courageous and resilient. You can't be self-pitying. You can't fall back on coping strategies that might be different to hers, but then criticize her for using bad coping mechanisms. If your moods are cycling badly, if you're falling into negative thinking, you can't really criticize her for falling into negative thinking either. We go first. I want you I want people watching me to be optimistic, to not take their problems too seriously, to have some curiosity and a sense of humor about what they've experienced and what could happen moving forward. I have to go there first. I have to be in that state first. So I lead you. I go first. I'll be like, oh yeah, you just try and be as optimistic as you can. Be disciplined, take consistent daily action. Meanwhile, I'm drinking every night. I'm addicted to drugs. I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. How's that going to work? A good number of people will feel it. They'll see it. They'll intuit it. And here's another thing that I learned. Assume that people can see right through you. Assume that they can see right through you. They can't, but you should assume that. It keeps you disciplined. Assume that you're fooling no one. Because so if you assume that you're fooling no one, that's wrong. That's wrong. You are fooling people. But how would you act if you assumed you were fooling no one, as opposed to the other end of the spectrum, where you get people who think they're fooling everybody? They think that if they act this way, talk this way, put on this front, but they're actually doing that over there, that nobody knows. Kids know, man. Adolescents know. They used to say that to me in the schools. They'd be like, before I went into a class, they'd be like, they could smell fear, They're not tigers, these are children. But they were right to the extent that if you go in and try and bluff them or shout them down or do whatever you're going to do, why should they listen to you? For me, this goes back beyond door work. It goes back to, I think it was like 1999 when I came out of the Aston Business School and I was studying business and marketing. And I got some really super hardline American training. It was a training course that you'd get as like DVDs that would come in the mail. And they would teach us, like, Americans are good marketeers. Whatever America may or may not be, it knows how to do marketing and sales. They would teach, the market doesn't give a shit about you or your story. You have to make the market care. I was like, damn, that hurts my feelings. You know, I have a business, I have a dream, I have a story, and I want to tell people. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. They had like an acronym for it, which was, what's in it for me? So whatever that acronym is, what's in it for me? So as you wrote sales copy or you wrote a marketing campaign, you put yourself in the mind of the prospect and be like, what's in it for me? Why should I change that for children? Why should I change that for adolescents? I'm supposed to go into a school to kids who are living nightmares in hellish conditions and be like, yeah, don't get involved in gangs. Don't do anything that gives you power. Don't do anything that gives you an identity. Don't do anything that gives you a family that you don't have. Do these GCSEs instead. I couldn't do that. It wouldn't work. Why should they care about what I'm saying? That's what I ask. And you should ask that question as well. If you're struggling to reach somebody, ask yourself the question. Assume, because it's empowering to do so, that it's you. It might not be you that's failing. The other person might just not want to listen, and that then becomes their issue. But you should run philosophically, you should run the due diligence and check. Is my message boring? Is it contradictory? Am I being a hypocrite? Is there anything about this message that I could make it more compelling? Everything is kind of a sales pitch. Really, communication is a sales pitch. It's a signal at the very least in evolutionary biology terms. If you want people to listen to you, you got to convince them. Don't just assume that they will. Never pull rank. Never, 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 ever, 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 ever pull rank on a teenager. Their understanding of the dominance hierarchy at that age is superior to mine and to yours. They'll see right through you. The only thing you're saying when you pull rank is you're saying, I'm not cool, I'm not relevant, and I am nowhere on the dominance hierarchy. There is no way that you can more quickly express your utter impotence and irrelevance than by saying, listen to me. Why? Because I'm your mother. Listen to me. Why? Because I'm your teacher. Listen to me. Why? Because if you don't, you won't pass your exams. You may as well just give up and go home at that point. I learned that early on. I learned that really, really early on. Never pull rank. Never pull rank. It's back to sales again. Always be closing. You must convey to them authority. It's hard. That's why I say it's hard, because I don't have my own children. My sister has children, and I watch and I'm with them, and I'm like, it's such a test. You want to be a good parent, or in my case, a good uncle. You literally have to be a better person. Last little story, and then I'll stop. One of my nephews, he's obsessed with phones. And I think when I observe him, it's because phones are imbued with power. So adults, they look at phones and their expressions change and their emotions go up and down, and they show each other messages and they show each other memes. And he just looks and he's going, that's cool. That cool is social value. Cool is higher up the hierarchy. Cool is power. What's cool? This is cool. He's 4, I think, 4.5 now. And I was sat with him at the time, he would have been 3. And I was running around the garden with him. I've got a ACL injury. My knee was just operated on. And I was playing with him, I was running around the garden with him. And then Uncle Richard was tired. So Uncle Richard sat down. When Uncle Richard sits down, because he's a conditioned zombie like everybody else, he pulls out his phone to check his messages. Bang, my nephew was straight on it. He pulls the phone out of my hand, and I know that he likes, there's a YouTube channel, it's really weird. It's trucks that talk to each other in Russian. Don't ask. I mean, when you get into like kids' YouTubes, they're like 80 million views on a truck in a forest talking Russian. Loves it. He's not Russian, he's American. Loves it. And I wanted him to watch it so that I could sit down, so that I could sit still, because my knee hurt and my back hurt. But when he watches it, his eyes like go really wide and his mouth opens and he does this. And he does this weird breathing and I don't like it. So I'm sat there with a sore back and a sore knee. And I'm like, I have a choice. Uncle Richard either lets this happen and lets this cyber heroin go into the 3-year-old's brain, or Uncle Richard gets back up and runs around the garden, because he'll do either. He loves both things equally. It makes you be a better person. It makes you be a more authentic person. It makes you, if you want to do it well, it pushes you. It really, really pushes you. It's hard. I only do it occasionally. I'm a tourist in parenting. I occasionally visit the land of parenting and I go, this is hard. You can have these children back. I'm leaving now. It's tough. I know it's tough. But in the situation that we're going through, that was my final story. This is my final word on the situation we're going through. What we're seeing is, I don't know how interested you are in getting into this with your daughter or how open she is to this, but it's worth having a conversation philosophically with no agenda and no spin on what we're going through now and how she feels about that. What is this? What do we think is going on? What do you know to be true about what is going on? What do I know to be true about what is going on? Where am I wrong about what's going on? Where are you wrong about what's going on? And have that conversation. Compare it to other times in history. What do we know about situations like this in history? What does it happen when ideological infection occurs? What does it happen when political ideologies fall down? What does it happen when science gets out of balance with truth, or medicine becomes pseudoscience, becomes the tool of politicians, or whatever way you want to go with it? You need to talk about it. Really, you should have a conversation. You should be like, okay, how do you feel about this? What sucks about this? Well, what sucks about this is that you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know how it's going to end. You don't know what liberties you're going to have at the end of it. You are being gaslit left, right, and center. The mainstream media is saying this, certain epidemiologists are saying that, other politicians are saying that, and nobody really knows what's the core of what's going on. We've lost the center. Wow, that's kind of chaotic. Okay, so what would a resilient, courageous person want to convey to their daughter or their son about that? It's been chaotic before. It's been plenty more chaotic before. It's been worse than this before. The threat has been much, much higher. You look at the threat of nuclear holocaust in the late 80s. I think it peaked around 1981. I would have been 3 years old at the time. It was way worse. It was way worse. There were countries around Europe that were waiting for people to come over the border and enslave them. Men with black suits on with skulls on their hats or little red stars on their hats to come and enslave them. It's been way worse before. And we survived all that. So that's called a reframe. So you can make a comparative reframe. But what are you leading her towards? You're leading her to what? Resilience, courage, critical thinking, and away from hopelessness and despair. We've survived everything so far. There's no reason to think that we won't survive this as well. So you can go there with anyone at a philosophical level and find something approximating courage. There was one more note that I took on that, which is when you're doing this, don't focus on the content. Don't try and take anything I've said here and take it content-based. Try to focus on the meta-contextual. There's a narrative that we're living through. It's a particular type of narrative. So you want to challenge things at a meta-contextual level. And I think that's probably all I have to say about that. Thank you very much for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention on that one. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you.